At 65, the secret I thought I'd take to my grave slipped out in the cruelest way, through my grandson's innocent question at the dinner table. He looked straight at me, fork still in his hand, and asked why a woman named Clara kept calling my phone at night. The syllables light on his tongue like he was trying out a new word from school. Unaware that he had just cracked something old and brittle inside this house, my wife, Estelle, froze mid-reach over the mashed potatoes, her hand hovering, the steam fogging her glasses a little. And the radio in the kitchen drifted static between AM ballgames and weather warnings. And the roast I'd carved with the dull knife smelled of rosemary and pepper but tasted suddenly like paper in my mouth, and I remember thinking absurdly about the scrape of the chair legs on the oak floor and how I should have fixed those felt pads months ago. Anything to not look at her eyes while my phone buzzed again, face down near the salt shaker, buzzing like a small trapped animal under a glass. I told myself not to touch it, that the worst thing would be to snatch it up like a guilty teenager. So I kept my hands flat on the table and reached for the false patience I'd spent decades weaving around myself, the same patience that got me through long nights at the plant. The same patience I used when my left knee locked and ached after mowing the lawn. And I said lightly that it must be a wrong number. Telemarketers don't sleep at a decent hour anymore, and my grandson Owen, all freckles and cowlick, said no. Pop, Siri said, Clara, and I laughed then, too loud. Foolish, too sharp for a family table on a Sunday. Estelle didn't laugh. Just set the serving spoon down so carefully it didn't make a sound. That was the moment I felt the old scaffolding shift. The years of routine we had built, church on Sundays, pharmacy runs on Wednesdays, coffee in the brown mugs we bought at a flea market in '87, groaning under a weight I'd pretended wasn't still there. Clara had been a name kept in dark drawers. A name that lived in motel receipts folded into jacket linings and in a silver flip phone I kept in the garage behind the paint cans. A name that meant lemon cleaner and a laugh she tried to swallow. A name I had promised myself I'd leave behind when her life turned down a road mine couldn't follow. But the thing about a secret is it doesn't stay still, it breathes when you do. It learns the layout of your house. It knows which loose step creaks and which cabinet sticks in summer humidity. Owen reached for my phone, the bright curiosity of a 12-year-old who has never had to lie for his life, and I heard my voice come out quiet but edged, "Leave it, bud." And Estelle's gaze cut from the boy to me and then to the hall where our bedroom door was closed in the drawer, the one I thought would forever be just a drawer with socks and a half-used travel-size lotion from a hotel in Amarillo, waited like a mouth about to open. I have always been good with my hands, bolts and belts and gauges. Long before everything became touchscreens and passwords. Long before my son installed cameras that talk to our phones and doorbells that sing. I know the weight of objects and the way a safe hums when the dial turns. And as Estelle rose without a word, I could feel the miles I had walked keeping certain things out of her sight roll out behind me. Like a bad road, the house was full of small sounds, Owen chewing slower, the heater clicking, the refrigerator motor catching, the dog shifting under the table, but all of it fell away as I heard the bedroom drawer slide open, that wooden sigh that had once seemed married to simple things like socks and old receipts and now felt like a curtain being drawn back. I wanted to stand up and follow her and I wanted to run, and instead I did neither. I sat and stared at a dark ring on the table from the iced tea sweat and remembered the first time Clara said she liked the way my hands shook when I held a cup in the morning. She wasn't hired for love, not at the start, not officially. She came every other week with a bucket that smelled like lemons and a gentle way of moving around our knickknacks, dusting my model trains like they were glass birds. She called me Mr. Hale until the day the handle on our back door stuck and I hit it too hard and the old scar along my thumb reopened, a sliver of red bright as a tongue. And she took my hand without asking, pressed her thumb into that soft web between mine and said, "Hold still, Eli." I hadn't heard my name said like that in years, like a thread pulled through cloth. That afternoon she cleaned the glass of the dining room frames with such care that the photos looked new. Estelle and I at the county fair, the kids with suntanned faces. And I felt disloyal to feel noticed by someone who had memorized the way my radio drifts between stations. If you ask me when the line was crossed, I could point to 20 moments and each one would be true. The day I bought her a coffee at the corner diner when her bus ran late. The evening she came by on a Monday instead of a Thursday because Estelle was out playing cards. And the light turned a soft orange on the wall and she stood too close to ask me where the extra trash bags were. The time she laughed in my truck at the little bobblehead of a ballplayer my grandson left on the dash, and the sound of it made the cab feel small as a closet. But the truth is the line had always been there like a painted stripe in a parking lot. And I started parking sloppily. I had told myself that loneliness was a slow ache that needed ice, not stitches, that it was harmless to enjoy kindness. But one kindness folded into another and then became a habit and then became a lockbox of habits, and here was my wife heading for the place where I kept the key. I stood then, finally. And the old knee gave me a jolt that made my breath catch, and my son's voice, Mark's voice, came from the living room where he was half watching the game. "Dad, you good?" And I said yes, a lie smaller than the big one but harder in my mouth because it brushed past a boy who once believed I could fix anything with a wrench. I followed the track of Estelle's footsteps down the hall. Soft on the runner she chose last spring. Blue with little vines that she said looked like the wallpaper her mother had. And I paused at the bedroom door because the smell of her powder was so clean and ordinary it almost knocked me down. Estelle had the drawer open, and in her hands the small metal tin that had once held caramel candies from the drugstore. The kind you unwrap with an awkward twist, the lid skinned silver, the edges dented from years in a nightstand. And she held it like it was heavier than a candy tin should be. There are things a man keeps because he can't bear to throw them away and because he can't bear to see them every day either, so they live in a purgatory of maybe. Inside were letters that were not letters so much as folded napkins with handwriting, gas station receipts penciled with dates, a bus ticket stub, two small photographs the size of postage stamps that showed only half a face and a shoulder, and the cheap bracelet from the clinic with my name printed wrong and the date from that winter. When I said I was at the VA for tests, Estelle didn't look at me. She looked at the bracelet for a long slow stretch of time that made the heater click back on. And the radio in the kitchen find a station with a preacher in the middle of a sentence about mercy. We were married 43 years and I have seen her angry maybe 5 times and I have seen her joyful many, and I have seen her scared twice. Once when our son had pneumonia and once when a driver blew through a stop sign near the farmer's market, and this look wasn't any of those. This was something like recognition and arithmetic. The kind of look a woman wears when a quilt finally shows its pattern. I said her name just the once, Estelle, and the sound of it was a small bird hitting a window. She folded the tin shut without flinching. The gentle click somehow louder than anything else in the house. And she asked me if Clara was the woman who called last night. And I said yes, though part of me wanted to say no. Wrong number, wrong name, wrong town. Wrong life. She asked me if Clara knew this address, and I said I didn't think so. And she asked me if she had my number because I gave it to her or because I never took it away. And I said nothing at all. People think affairs are all heat and bad motel art. But the colder parts are the worst, the silences around the lies. The way a man learns which drawer makes the least noise, the way he times his showers. The way he uses Saturday mornings to tell the truth halfway so he can better hide the rest. Estelle slipped the tin back into the drawer like she was returning a book to a library. And she closed it with her palm. And that's when Owen's footsteps came thumping toward the hall, loud, unafraid. And he stopped in the doorway with the fearless clumsiness of a boy who has 3 different grass stains on his jeans and asked if he could have more pie. And Estelle looked at him and something in her softened for just a breath because he has his father's eyes, and she said yes, sweetheart. And then she turned back to me and said we're going to finish dinner. And after that you and I are going to talk without the radio on. There is a particular dread that belongs to old men who thought they had outrun certain storms. It is the dread of realizing the map was wrong. I followed them back to the table. And we ate a little more, and I pretended to listen to Mark's commentary about the bullpen and who's washed up, and the dog nudged my shin like he always does when roast is on the menu. And the phone buzzed one more time and nobody touched it. And if you want to know whether I hated Clara in that moment, I didn't. And if you want to know whether I loved Estelle, I did. And if you ask how a man can hold both of those without splitting open, the answer is he doesn't. Something else splits for him. After dishes. I walked out to the garage under the pretense of putting the carving knife back in the tool chest so I could breathe air that didn't smell like rosemary and guilt. The flip phone was in the shoebox behind the old paint cans. The one with the label from our daughter's sneakers, worn and soft. I held it a long time and thought about the day Clara said she was done with the bus. That she'd saved enough to get a car. And I had been happy for her in a way that felt like pride and shame braided together. The garage was cold and smelled of cut grass gone sweet. And I set the phone down and turned off the light, and when I walked back into the kitchen, Estelle had already cleared the pie plates and stacked them like little moons. And she was standing at the sink not washing anything, just standing. And I went to say her name again, to do the foolish thing of starting at the end. When the new doorbell, Mark's fancy one that sends his phone a clip, chimed a bright, cheerful, upward melody that did not belong in a house with heavy air, Mark shouted, "I'm coming." And Owen jumped up because doorbells still mean excitement to kids. And Estelle wiped her hands on the dish towel even though they were dry. And a part of me knew before anyone else did. The way a dog senses thunder before the first roll. Through the frosted glass I could see a shape, a woman's silhouette. And then a pause as if she was steadying herself, and then a voice. Clear and calm through the speaker Mark had installed. A voice that had never before entered this house in daylight. Saying 4 words that pulled every nail in the framing loose in my chest. I'm here for my father. At 65. I never thought the word father would come back to me like a blade, but there it was. Spoken at my own front door, where the porch light hummed and the cicadas rattled against the dusk, that voice steady and sure, young enough to scrape against my bones because it was hers. Clara's daughter, the one I only half believed into existence. The one I never allowed myself to picture at the table with crayons or blowing out candles. The one who now stood 3 feet from my wife, from my son, from my grandson, and claimed me out loud. Mark was the first to react, his head jerking toward me with a frown that wasn't suspicion yet but would be in seconds. And Owen's wide eyes flicked from the door to my face like he was watching a magician's trick gone wrong, while Estelle held still, one hand curled around that dish towel like a lifeline. And she didn't ask who, she didn't blink, she just waited for me to answer. Because silence itself was an answer and I had given her too many already. I stepped toward the door as if the floor was new ice, each creak of the wood sounding like a confession, and when I opened it, the night air hit me with the smell of cut grass and gasoline, and there she was. Taller than I expected, her hair pulled back the way Clara used to when she cleaned. Her chin tilted like she was daring me to flinch. And her eyes, those eyes carried a map I didn't want anyone in this house to read. She didn't smile, didn't soften. Just said my name with that certainty children reserve for what they've rehearsed in their heads 100 times, Eli Hale, like she'd practiced it in mirrors, and Mark barked a laugh. Bitter and sharp, "Dad, what the hell is this?" And Owen whispered, "Is she family?" And Estelle turned slowly, so slowly, to look at me, her voice soft but iron, "Eli, answer her." My tongue felt too thick, my knee ached like it wanted me to sit. But I forced air through my throat, and the sound came out broken. She's Clarice. And the way the name fell in my kitchen felt like dropping glass. Estelle shut her eyes like she was bracing for a wave. Mark cursed under his breath and pushed past me into the night, demanding answers from a stranger who looked more like me than I wanted to admit. And Owen stood frozen, the pie half-eaten still on his plate, forgotten. I tried to reach for the girl, no, the woman, but my hand hung empty because she stepped back, arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together, and she said, "I didn't come for you. I came for her," and pointed not at Estelle, not at Mark, not at Owen, but at the house itself. At the life I'd built and lied inside, and my chest hollowed out. Estelle placed the dish towel down, finally, neatly, the way she's always done. And she walked past me, past the girl, down the porch steps without her purse, without her sweater, into the dark, and didn't turn back once.